Welcome to What's Your Sign? I'm Julia Loken.
I'm Stevie Goldstein.
And I'm the little dance party of this podcast.
Cute. I saw a cool, that reminds me of Gemini's big like disco ball energy to me. And I saw a very cool, like someone made a stained glass disco ball, not like the actual shape, but it was like one that would hang in the window, but like a disco ball. And it was very beautiful. I believe they were called, oh, let me look it up so I can plug them and say,
Was it,
even though
it was ball shaped, like still shaped just
yes,
like a D ball?
That's cool.
hang on, I'll send it.
That's
And
cool.
also House of Pale is the name of the artist.
Wow.
And now I'm sending you guys
Pale,
this.
like lack of skin color.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
House of Pale. I'm texting it to the group so you can see it. But
Wow.
it was like a beautiful disco
Beautiful.
ball.
Oh my gosh,
Well,
that is pretty.
I feel like I've seen a lot of disco ball DIY shoes, a disco ball mirror. There's
Mhm.
there's
the
disco
planters
ball.
are popular
Mhm.
right now. Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel like a Gemini
Beyonce's
loves a good
tour
dance.
looks are very like reflective. We're seeing a lot of feels very
Mhm.
Gemini with mirror sort of stuff.
Well,
Oh,
makes
I
sense
see.
coming out of that long Mars retrograde, that long Mars in Gemini, of people thinking of like, I don't know, of that being us being in that space. I don't know.
Totally. Wait, this is very cool. Also, I mean, I'll link this in the things, but it's not a. It's like a what?
Yeah.
What stained glass of a disco thing.
A
Very
2D,
shiny.
yeah, it was like a 2D disco ball, but I'd never
Mhm.
seen anything like it, and it was really beautiful.
That's sick. Also, like while we're in stained glass territory and promoing, even this is not a sponsored ad, but Ben's dot website. I think it's Ben's dot website. Also very custom stained glass. Old friend from Illinois days. But yeah, Ben's dot website at Instagram. If anyone else wants some fun stained glass things to look at, just gorgeous. Isn't Gemini like sharing Rex sort of season? Like un unasked for recommendations will be flying in Gemini time.
Love it.
I need to get my house in order. Like this is actually inspired. I mean, I need to order tiles for my balcony. Like I'm ready to get my hands in the things.
Gemini season's always so fun. I feel like this is the I know it's probably technically Cancer season, but I feel like this is the real spring summer transition time.
Mhm.
And it's also a heavy social calendar time, and I don't know, it seems fun.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I mean, it should be like too. I mean, we've just come off just a very, I know we've talked a little bit on Patreon, but just Taurus season, it was one for the books. Eclipses, Mercury retrograde, just a lot of stuff. And this Gemini season looks relatively light, or I guess not as newsworthy as maybe the last sun sign season that we've had. So there's something also really shoulder drop kind of nervous system relaxing to be like, oh, and I don't know, we can just sort of exist and live life and not, I don't know, we hopefully shouldn't feel like the doom or gloom of the astro weather, but I mean, I think it was hard to not notice. I felt like everyone around me, myself included, was going a little wackadoo. And now I feel like this Gemini season invites like the theme that I wrote down was like a lot of connection and intention, which I think Gemini is just so good at saying what they want to do and then also inviting others, or I don't know, speaking it out into how they want to be in relationship with other people. So I think that this is a nice little come down from maybe having our socks rocked a bit during this past Taurus time.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think we're just getting that, like, I mean, breath of fresh air kind of feeling. It is, I feel like we've had a lot of, we're still going to have some, water in there, but I feel like we had a very earth water heavy Taurus season. I mean, the word that was coming to my mind was like soggy, of that, like, I don't know, not, or like a heaviness in there with eclipses, with the retrograde, with the, all of it. And I think that that's like not going to completely go away in Gemini season, but I do think having that kind of air levity will be a nice change of pace, even though we might also be that, like, I do feel a little PTSD of Gemini energy from all of that Mars. I know it will be different in this season, but I am not exactly like stoked for more for more Gemini.
Yeah, we are all I think everyone had a little bit of trauma from Gemini Mars epic run. But there's something a little leaving, like, don't worry, it's not a Mars. It's just some other things.
I know it's not the same, and I do feel like this is like a quick. I mean, it's very like the 21st to the 21st. Like, we promise it's going to be like your normal scheduled programming in terms of this. But I think that there's some interesting, I still think we have that interesting kind of fixed energy in the background because we have that shift. Mars moves into Leo right before the sun moves into Gemini. We also have Venus moving into Leo later in the month and kind of that preview later on. So I think that having that kind of boost from the Gemini energy will be nice.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have some of the outer planets turning retrograde as well. And so, those will kind of be fixed, for lack of a better word. It's not that they'll be in fixed signs. They'll just be not exactly going super forward or super fast or back because they don't move super fast.
It almost feels like this is going to be actually our opportunity to kind of like talk about what's been going on. I feel like we've been like the experience of it in Taurus season, and now Gemini is a little bit more like you said, a heavy social time, but also a time to kind of catch up and go like, how was your thing? How was this for you? This is how it was for me. And how that then can maybe change some of our perspectives on what we've gone through and how we're going to move forward. Too. I always find that those kind of like, I don't know, when you're in it, it's hard to contextualize your experience. And then I think kind of that meeting with the other, which is very Gemini, conversational, social, and the celebratory. We've all been going through it. Let's just dance. Let's just have a good time. Either side of that to me, whether it's the connecting or the kind of fun, let's, lose ourselves for the night kind of energy. Either way feels like a nice antidote, or just not even antidote. That's maybe too harsh, but like a change of pace.
Mm-hmm. I think this last Taurus season too, whether it's what's happening for people personally or societally, has been a lot of I think it's going to just keep being encouraged with the Gemini-ness, because I've had like friends be like, can we just hang out at each other's houses and save money? Like, do we need to make this something? Like, I just want to spend time getting to the root of what you want versus like, I don't really need to go out. I just want to like sit by your side or like do something with you, or whether it's career stuff too, of like, actually, I just need to get paid this certain amount so then I can have more free time to do this. So I think that there's, especially before we get into Venus retrograde coming up in July, which we'll start, we'll get into some of the datelines, because we'll have datelines. Is that where Dateline got its name from? I was just watching Dateline. I was like, where is this? What is a Dateline? Anyways, we'll have Leo and Venus eventually during Gemini season. That was a Gemini tangent there. But yeah, I think that there's definitely some good reflection in Gemini energy.
Mm-hmm. Isn't Dateline a show that examines a specific topic over time? Like the order this murder happened timeline kind of thing?
I don't know. I watched the Nicholas Rossi one recently about the guy who is pretending to be British or Scottish, who's like a big assaulter. He's very
assault charges in the States.
I wish his charges weren't just so heinous, because it's very funny, like what he is doing. But yeah, that feels also very like the Gemini clown, just like ridiculousness. But I don't know. I think that makes sense if that's.
They like have the dates on like a timeline of some sort, or like I don't know, the background and this. I don't know. Maybe
that makes sense. That's as good
who knows,
good of assessment as any.
Dateline, let us know in the comments.
If you know why, tell us.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, Sun moves into Gemini on the 21st of May at 12:09 p.m. A.m. I'm sorry. Right before that, before the Sun moves in, Mars will have moved into Leo on the 20th of May as well, and have that opposition to Pluto right away, which is not, technically part of this Gemini season, but I feel like bears noting. As the Sun moves into Gemini, we're going to have that trine to Pluto, as we've also talked about in previous season episodes, where everything is kind of going to aspect Pluto as soon as it moves, because Pluto is at that 0 degrees of Aquarius, at least for a tad bit longer. We're also going to get a Sun sextile to Mars in Leo at that 0 degree too. So I feel like that 0 degree Gemini is getting a lot. We're starting off with not necessarily a bang, but definitely a sparkle of a feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have that Mars square to Jupiter the next day. What else do we have? I like this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I think one of the interesting things about Leo and Aquarius being aspects for Gemini during this time is this kind of, I think one of the things people really don't like about being in public and socializing is there is like a social hierarchy and also an appropriate way to behave. And I'm not talking about like cotillion, like I'm not that stuffy, but it does just feel like there are certain things that you have to do. Like if you're at someone's birthday, you should probably wish them happy birthday and those kind of things. But I think that puts a lot of pressure on people, and to have to, say hi to so and so, or especially with work gatherings and stuff where it's like, well, this is because my manager's here, I can't do this or whatever. And I think that hierarchy and those things like are very natural to Leo and Aquarius, or at least understanding how they work, whether or not, like, I feel like Aquarius isn't necessarily like want hierarchy, but they still understand the rules of it. So I'm interested to see those three signs kind of playing together.
I know that this happens with all signs too, but there is something to me about this, like the opposition between Pluto and Mars, which I feel like are very intense and like intense energies, Pluto and Mars energy, and how Gemini both is like in harmonious aspect to both of them, and thinking about Gemini too as like not being two-faced, but being able to see both sides and being able to kind of shift and communicate with both of these things, and how that is both good and bad, like in your example too, where it's like someone who can thrive in that hierarchical situation but also feels the pressure of not being able to do exactly what they want, or feeling someone seeing you in an environment that they don't normally see you in, and being like, oh, I don't like that you say hi to someone at their birthday because you just have to, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. Yeah. That like when you see how adept someone is at those kinds of things, or being able to understand all of that, how that is both like empowering and understandable, but also sometimes can, I don't know, be frustrating to people, or be frustrating that that's how the reality is, that's how it has to be, or whatever.
Something I've heard from a lot of people that have managed me, and this is not a compliment, is that they don't appreciate when I see them somewhere and I introduce them to my friends as my boss. I've heard this from more than one boss. And I think it's because I have I'm not like a stuffy professional in my job. That's not something that has to be done. And so I think they feel a closeness to me that isn't, I clearly don't reciprocate. And so that is something I've heard like more than once, where it's like, could you tell people I'm your colleague or friend? And it's like, no.
Yeah.
I have Mars and Aquarius. I'm not going to lie that you're my friend.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So I think those kind of things are fun and interesting, and in this social time to see things like that play out. And that has affected me negatively at work more than once. Should it? No, but it has.
No, but that does make sense too, of then thinking of this like Mars square Jupiter after, of the like not being able to overinflate your idea of who you maybe were to someone, or how you fall in that order, or how someone literally, because that also is like, I would go, my Libra rising ass is like, but that doesn't mean you're not also a friend, but you are literally their boss. That is still like literally the truth. And I think that's another like Gemini.
It's like, I don't want my friend to say something to you that they wouldn't say to my boss. I feel like I'm doing my work, but that's that way. No, but I also think that those things can, like, that's talking about personal relationships, where I think these things are going to be playing out in larger scopes. So is it, people getting misnamed in newspapers, somebody's like saying Mr. instead of Doctor, and those kind of things. That was one of the most fun things for me to watch during some of the Trump stuff, was like watching which journalists wouldn't say ex-president or former president or whatever. Those kind of things are very interesting to me. And so seeing, how those things play out socially.
Yeah, I think this the sun like giving on the 21st that sextile to Mars feels also like what's realistic and doable. And then that square from Jupiter is that like a check-in, if it's like, well, but I have this idea to do this, or this is how I want to do it. It's like, I feel like it's a quick 1-2 ego check sort of punch of like, I don't know, it's like, it feels very just start, just do it already. Just get it going, and the bigger stuff will come, but it's maybe like, it's baby steps. It is whatever it is that you're building, but relatively like, I don't know, normal air quotes, like relatively like soft entry week overall. I think for first week of Gemini, we have a nice Venus in Cancer sextile to Uranus on the 26th, which also feels at that end of that first week pretty, I don't know, just like a nice, it's Friday. It feels like this could be a time of, doing something that's maybe romantic, or doing something that's a little different, or like inviting in maybe some sort of new opportunity too with Venus. And then also, I just like the Venus encouragement from Uranus as something that it just feels like something maybe that's like necessary to update too. It's wardrobe stuff. Maybe it's like clean out the closet. I don't know. Like maybe it just feels like that refresher on how you like want to invest in whatever it is you're investing in.
I think this might be skipping too far ahead, but when Venus enters Leo on the 5th of June, I know there's other stuff to cover before that. Those like Venus will be in the opposite sign of where Uranus is ruling it, if that makes sense. It's like not mutual reception. It's like the opposite thing. And I think that's kind of interesting too, where Venus is like across the way from Uranus and Taurus.
Yeah, it's far away, and it's a skip that we'll come back to too. But I think Venus and Leo on the 5th too is the beginning of, before we get into Venus retrograde in that sign as well. So I think these build up time before we have Leo move into Venus feels, I don't know, not like a last call, but I do think it's like some dates to watch before we get into some very funky Venus territory come in the coming months. So might be a time. This might be a time window we look back on like, those days before the days between before Venus really goes on a different ride.
Well, it feels like it's not even so much going to be a different ride, but I think this is the same feeling that I have kind of that we just talked about in our Taurus new moon, where there's this sextile to Venus kind of shaking up some Venus. And then we're going to have Venus trine to Neptune shortly after that on the 2nd of June. And I feel like that is this like, I don't know, Venus clarification, Venus kind of like, I don't know, updates on this thing, and then being in Leo for so long is like then it's like the solidification of those things, even though it's not in the same sign. It'll move into a different part of our chart, but that kind of like, what is it like again when you start a habit? now what is it like to live with that habit for a long time, or whatever it is? Once you've declared a value, what does that then, when does that value come up and work in really ways? And what did you not know you were going to have to, what encounters are you having now that you've stated this value? You know, I think this is a simple example, but like you're vegan now or whatever, and you didn't realize that like, oh, at 4th of July, I can't eat, I have to bring my own things. And how does that make people feel when you bring your own food and ask them to grill something for you or whatever it is? Like I don't know.
I feel like that Venus in Cancer trine Neptune on June 2nd feels like, for anyone listening that like has that person they need to break up with, that feels like the last full day you just like have sex, go to the beach, do like, I don't, it feels like a movie where it's like, this is our send off before I need to move on and do more Venus and Leo things and things that are more for me. There's something about, I don't know, that it just feels so fantasy. I think I went to like the Laguna Beach tide pools during a Venus and Cancer trine Neptune day like 2 years ago. Just didn't have a breakup, but it just felt like it felt like it could have been one of those days where it's like you share an ice cream, you watch the sunset, and you're like, I don't know, it's like going off to college or something. Like, and now like that was beautiful and romantic, but cue the next day, full moon in Sagittarius. I sort of need to like go do something that's allows me to feel like I can be my biggest, fullest, freest self.
Mm-hmm.
So for anyone that's like, fuck, I've been meaning to schedule that all day romp with the person I've been meaning to break up with, that is your sign, June 2nd. It could be a nice day.
I think the Venus and Leo is going to be a little tricky too. So I think that there is like self-care that needs to happen with the end of Venus in Cancer and the beginning of Venus and Leo before we have the retrograde, and we hear all of these things about body image and, you know, don't change your hair and don't, you know, all those things that come out. And I think like is interesting to see how we value ourselves in those ways before we have the retrograde, you know. And so if journaling is something that you're interested in doing, I think this is a good time to talk about, like, write down about the way, what you think about the way, you know, you dress or your hair or whatever, so that when those things come up later, you have something to look back on and say, oh, that actually sounds like I was pretty into my eyebrows in beginning of June.
Mm-hmm.
I want to shave them off.
I like that. We have a Mercury conjunct Uranus as well, that happens in the 4th right after that. And I think that is that, like, again, we're getting some kind of, I don't know if they're necessarily positive aspects, but we are getting some different Uranus aspects than we've been having the past few years. We've had that, you know, Saturn Uranus square, which was a big signature of 2021, and definitely having you know, the Pluto square, or not Pluto square yet, but I like this, like, following that sextile to Uranus, having the Mercury conjunct Uranus, of being like, no, this is the, and I like that of like the after this Venus trine Neptune of like, no, I'm serious this time. We are making a change. We're speaking it into existence. We're saying that this is different this time, and then kind of sticking with it. Again, that Venus into Leo happens on June 5th. Venus moves into Leo, and it will be in the sign of Leo until October 8th. We obviously will talk about this later on as well, but we will have that Venus retrograde from July 22nd through September 3rd. So Venus is going to be in this sign for a while. So I think that this direct portion until the 22nd of July is definitely energy to watch. I really like that idea of journaling and kind of keeping track of who you know yourself to be, who you want to be in terms of self-image, and how you intend to care for yourself in that way, because I agree that is something that might be difficult come later in that Venus transit, but also is something like just good to know. I don't know, good information to have and to kind of declare and to do these things. And I think when we're, especially in Gemini season, when we are maybe a little more curious and conversational, this might be a good time to be like, I don't know, not necessarily getting feedback, but noticing if people comment on a certain thing and how that makes you feel, or what is the interactions that you're having. Are you connecting with people better or differently when you are feeling a certain way about yourself, and kind of tracking those things and how we can, I don't know, leverage that.
Mhm.
And
It's
don't
not the time. Oh.
mishear me as to say that you should write all the things you hate and read them later or something like that. I'm not talking about like
Yes.
writing that breakup letter, then never sending it, and then reading it over every day till you
Mhm.
drive yourself insane.
No, but I like this as committing to like a self-love practice too, because I think that part of that is also knowing that you need to do that even when you aren't necessarily feeling the best about yourself or those things, and having something to kind of refer back to or know what your intention is around those is really powerful, I think. And we have that just like all ingresses, we're going to have that opposition to Pluto right away as soon as Venus moves into Leo. And I think that kind of, again, like reiterating that energy from the beginning of the season. We're seeing that kind of like the mid, we have that check-in of like, what are we transforming? Where are we having that kind of like, not power struggle, but it does feel very power struggle of this, of like, what is not keeping us, I don't know how to explain this, I'm doing like hand motions with it, but that like, what do we need to kind of transform in order to get to where we want to be around that? What's keeping us from feeling as beautiful and loving towards ourselves as possible? And not necessarily just ourselves, but I think those things, thinking of like what systems are in place, what is the world set up for me to love myself, to care about myself, to feel the way that I want to feel, or and what does that then, what questions does that then bring up? What does that send us on? Because after that, we have this Mercury sextile to Neptune, which I think is another time to kind of be, I don't know, thinking, dreaming, considering, seeing where we're at. And I think thinking too on the heels of our Taurus new moon, that Mercury sextile, which if you aren't a patron, join us over on Patreon. We do bonus episodes on the new and full moon every month, patreon.com/what's your sign podcast. But we talked about how the new moon really spans the full degree, 30 degrees of Taurus, really. And I think having this Mercury sextile Neptune, thinking of that on the heels of that Taurus new moon, where are our thoughts on those things? Again, Venus energy, value energy. What are we able to imagine for ourselves if we are able to make these kinds of transformations and changes too? I know that's kind of heady and a lot, but I hope you were able to follow along with me on that.
I think it's all good to bring up before we get into Venus retrograde too, because it's probably going to be things that come up. And I think, I don't know, like I was just looking up, I was trying to take like a weekend trip with some friends, and the places where you used to be able to hike into hot springs now are a place you can rent them for Instagram photo shoots for $200 an hour. And it's just like, that ain't what I want. And like, that's not like the things I want to give my money to or spend time on. And I don't know. I think that there is something of what it is we want to be that represents us. Like our dollars do represent us, how we spend, like what we want to share. And I think the aesthetics things, like, you know, the reason even we hear like don't cut your hair or whatever during Venus retrograde is because it might look fine. You just might not feel like it looks fine. So it's not the time to buy a 19 times magnification mirror. I don't know if any time is the time to buy a 19 times magnification mirror, because that's a real hell one can deep dive into.
I also think it's like, don't get a random piercing. Your hair's going to grow back. And like, I'm not saying don't get a piercing, because piercings also heal up and stuff. But like, think about it a day is all we're saying. It's not like, and you know, for the retrograde, if you can, and if it's something you've been wanting for a long time, and this is the only time you can get it or whatever, like, do your experiment. You know, I'm not going to advise you to do it, but if you can wait. But some other things have to also happen during this time, maintenance things and all of those kind of things. And I think with Mercury and Neptune, one of the things that I think we should be wary of is, are the numbers actually the telling you the story? And so there's like a sexual assault and ice cream consumption correlation that is a very common correlation, not causation argument, because what the actual factor is for both things is heat. It's hot weather. More people are out. And so those types of crimes tend to occur because there are groups and things happening because people are out. summertime, summer break, those kind of things. And it's hot, so people eat ice cream. But the two things together, on while they may look it on a graph, are not necessarily related to each other. I guess they are through heat. But that's like a very common, like, did you know type of thing. And so I think if we're getting facts and figures about maybe like what Stevie's saying about the way our money is spent, and about like, especially I think the job market is one right now where we're like counting Uber drivers as employed, but we're not giving them the labor standards we give employees everywhere. So those type of things is like, are we interpreting things from the data that aren't necessarily there? And maybe, the data is giving us actual data, ice cream and sexual assault, but we're like reading something into it that isn't there, if that makes sense.
Do you know what both of these things made me think of? And this is also obviously in the context of the upcoming Venus retrograde, but also this Venus opposite Pluto and this Mercury sextile Neptune, all of these things of thinking of like, of what's the standard that we're like trying to set? What are we holding ourselves to, and what are we holding everyone else to also? And I think that makes me think of that Instagram photo shoot too, where it's like, if you feel like all of your vacations have to look like the most glamorous thing on earth because you have to post it for everyone, that means everyone now has to spend more, do more, be more. How are we increasing everyone's feeling of not enough? Where it's like, what am I doing that feels not enough because I feel not enough? And how is that perpetuating that for everyone? And how, if we maybe scale that down in a way that makes us feel quote unquote less than for a moment, that's actually making it for everyone. And that same makes me think of that in terms of like workers' conditions too, of that like, oh, I'm hustling hard, hustle culture, all of these things of it being like, it should be how much is enough, and what if we all are operating from enough?
Yeah.
Well, now the Songwriters Guild is starting to look at some payment things due to all the strikes that have been going on. I mean, it's all going to trickle down. I think too, that reference you made, Lisa, feels very, especially in the summer, I feel like, because it can be slower news time, is like, check the dates of when the articles are posted as well. Like that thing that just happened probably happened in 2018. So
did you see there was one this weekend that was like an immigration thing that was an old video attached to a new tweet.
Yeah.
And those kind of things where it's like you check the date, and it's like not user error, it's designed to like make you see it wrong. You know what I mean? And so it is investigating things and like using sources that like you trust.
Well, I mean, I just saw this like cute vid of this kid who starts his morning with slow, quiet mornings. And his mom's also happens to be a children's book author. I'm sure that was a really naturally organic, wow, viral moment that just so happened to caught on camera. Like, it's just like, God, like, can we bring back the word chuggy? I just all so chuggy. It's like, duh, of course. Like, this is so obvious. I don't know. It feels very appropriate for Gemini time of like, oh, was this perfectly curated thing? Maybe not 100% authentic.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I think we can bring back Chugi because on the 11th of June, Pluto retrogrades back into Capricorn.
Huge day.
And that feels very Chugi to me. Not necessarily, but it is.
Like,
wow.
Bomb City on that transit.
Yeah.
I have no interest. Come on. We just
busy day.
Finished it.
And we're not done. It's going to come back again.
Not done. But I do think there's that too, and I think that there is a little bit of like, it's that is like what it made me also viscerally do, of like, come on, this again, like let's move forward. Before we do that though, Mercury moves into Gemini and will trine Pluto before it's back into as it ingresses in. It is maybe technically out of sign, but it's happening. And we will also have a Venus square to Jupiter that day. Is that the second one? No. We had the Mars square too, but again, this reiterating, I think, again, of having that same thing when we have that like Mercury trine Pluto, of the idea of growth, maybe over promising, or maybe like we're talking about too, of it being convenient. How convenient would it be to scapegoat this group or this problem with this, or say it is this, or just give lip service, whatever. But having, I think, that square to Jupiter and those fixed signs to me is like, no, we're not no, we're not. Or like, here's the reality of it. Yes, it would be great if we could do that, but these are the numbers. This is what would happen if that happens, so on and so forth. But I think a little bit of a holding our horses with that square. Hopefully.
Big day. I would say June. I feel like, I know retrogrades of outer planets usually aren't like, they happen all the time, but retrograding back into the sign, the ingressing of it all, I think, is very noteworthy, especially of themes from Pluto and Capricorn and end times. Sorry to call it end times, but you know what I mean? Those final months we've had of Pluto Cap, like, it just does feel like we're really not done with these chapters, and then having Mercury moving to Gemini that day in its home sign. Yeah, I don't know. I could see that being, and there's all this like other stuff popping off on that day. It just feels like this could be a day that we get a lot of action. Maybe it's just people's personal lives feeling like what's going on, or maybe some news. I don't know. It feels like everyone should not like note June 11th and avoid the day, but don't be surprised maybe if June 11th is a bit of a spicy day, maybe plus or minus the day before and after.
It feels like it could be a newsworthy day in that Mercury into Gemini too, of it being, just a lot of opinions, a lot of talking about a thing, a lot of think pieces,
more Banks failing,
whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever that comes, and what
point.
does that then lead, thinking about covering both sides of something, all of these kinds of, that's what it conjures for me.
Totally.
And then we have
we're moving through
our Q4 of Gemini season. We have a Mercury square to Saturn on the 15th. Did I miss when it stations retrograde? No, it's right after that.
It's the 17th.
It was like right after that. The 15th Mercury square Saturn. We have a new moon in Gemini on the 17th. Another late in the season new moon.
And that might be the 18th, depending on where you are.
Yes. Which will be the same day that Saturn stations retrograde. Again, not a huge deal in terms of it being a social planet that is largely retrograde at least, half the year. So it's certainly not as newsworthy as, say, a Mercury retrograde or a Venus retrograde, which we will be talking about a lot this year. But still notable, I think, in the context of the Pluto going back into Capricorn and just the kind of Saturnness of it all of it being slow moving, and we got to 7 degrees, and now we're going to kind of move back over and go over those things too. I feel like Saturn is about triple checking your work, making sure that this is really that the lesson has been really hammered home too, and so I mean it's there. It will not change signs. It will be decidedly in Pisces for the entirety of the transit, but I mean, notable if you have anything between 0 and 7 that it's headed back over those parts of your chart.
I think for Saturn retrograde too, I mean, that's something that's new, is Saturn in Pisces, that we've kind of been analyzing a little bit more. So I think this is a really good time, again, if you're journaling, to see if we are revisiting those same themes, because it's fresh on the mind, right? It's harder when, Saturn goes retrograde at 27 degrees and it's been there for 3 years and you kind of forgot what happened 3 years ago, but this kind of just happened. So if it's something that's on your mind, like, this is a good time to analyze that and see, oh, okay, these are the themes that are coming up again, so that you have the upper hand for the rest of the 3 years Saturn's here.
Great point.
I think when Saturn goes retrograde too, since we do get typically like 6 months of it direct, 6 months of it retrograde, it could even be like different working processes. Maybe it sometimes can evoke a little bit of a breakthrough, or maybe like a different type of thinking, especially since it's been in Pisces, which is already kind of weird. Like, it might just be like turning the painting upside down and be like, oh, actually, like, I kind of like it that way. So could be an invite to maybe even play with different modalities of your thinking of it, like art, changing it from watercolors to acrylics or something,
maybe that's the day that the Songwriters Guild does or it's
like, actually, we're into getting paid. Weird.
Or it's like the Writers Guild gets a little part of what they're asking for, and we have to go back over and we're renegotiate or recontracting or drafting. No, we actually need this, and those kind of back and forths.
I was just gonna say that what it makes me think of those increments is like you work on a draft, you turn it in, and now you're getting notes and you're going back in and doing the next draft of a thing, and then it will still need to get it's not the final thing necessarily, but having those notes and changes and how that adjusts. But I love this. I mean, I think if there's anything, this is a big journal month, I think. If we've gotten
Dear
to
diary.
yes, I love that. On the 18th, we have a sun square to Neptune. Also noting in that it is in the new moon chart, but will be exact on the 18th at 27 degrees and 39 minutes. We're also getting a little bit of a move from Neptune too. I feel like Neptune was at that like 25 degrees for ages, and we are cooking a little bit. It's still slow moving, but moving forward. And then finally, we have a Jupiter sextile to Saturn on the 19th. Saturn will have stationed retrograde, but I think that is a nice, I don't know, that to me bodes well for something. It also could be, blown out of proportion or something too with Jupiter involved. But the sextile feels like, I don't know. I like that. That's a nice end to me of the season.
A soft encouragement.
Yeah.
Also, like the last day of, I don't know if we've skipped anything, but we also have Ceres enter Libra on the last day of Gemini season, which Ceres is our it's like the nature goddess asteroid. It isn't even asteroid. I can't remember right now, but it's, yes. I think that just feels very sweet, like a sweet, soft ushering in once we then move into Cancer season.
The sun leaves Gemini on the 21st at 7:58 a.m. when it moves into Cancer, and that is our Gemini season.
Not, less gossip magazine worthy than Taurus season for sure, but I think we're all maybe wanting that. And yeah, it feels very encouraging. And I would say like the biggest thing I have my eyes on is the date we mentioned with June 11th with that Pluto retrograde day. Just feels like bigger societal, like you said, newsworthy sort of day, perhaps. But otherwise it just feels like a nice little rebound after having maybe our head spin. Not that Gemini's chill. God, we all know Gemini's in our lives. They're ruled by the nervous system. They're air, they're mutable, they're moving around. But I think too, this might be, instead of talking it out at everyone, that could be going internally in journal time.
I think go ahead.
It'll be busy and there will be news regardless. I don't know that it'll be like it might be a little bit more like, I don't know, this is my wish, like lighthearted and fun news and stuff. And maybe we'll get a little bit more, I know we'll get great memes and humor stuff, and Gemini is so great with that. And I think this might be a little bit lighter of a time and people being really succinct with their takes and those kind of things.
I like that. I was just going to say again that I think on this journaling and this information and the processing to me feels like well suited for this season, where it isn't necessarily getting things done because we have those retrogrades. We have these this is the introduction to this, the beginning of Leo Venus, Pluto moving back into Capricorn, Saturn stationing retrograde. It doesn't feel like we are, leaping and bounding forward, but it does feel like a time where we can maybe have some space and some perspective and some conversation and more information that we can use to process what we're going through, process where we hope to go, process what it is that we're feeling, and maybe have some interesting breakthroughs, have some new kinds of changes of heart and mind that can take us into things. If not interesting conversations and hear where other people are at too. I think that's something that maybe we haven't had as much because there's been such heavy astrology up to this point, and it's been dealing with things in kind of more crisis mode. And I think that having a little bit more fun, even those fun news things, I think it's seeing who's liking these things, who's making them, who has the good fun takes, I think is interesting and helpful. So
society's pretty bad right now. So, but we're all in it together. I think that's the Gemini-ness. It's we're all experiencing huge shifting times, and we still need to laugh, express, make art, commune together. So there is I don't know, that gives me some peace being like, oh, we're all in this shit bus, huh? It's like, okay. So yeah, I think finding your people and speaking on it, but not, I don't know, not in the last Taurus season anyway, where it's just been like feeling, I don't know, there's something that's always lighthearted about Gemini because it keeps going. We all see, like, Gemini knows that it's like, that's, things aren't finite.
I think also like naming what is happening in the moment is a very like mutable thing, and saying what the moment calls for, whether that be the joke that kind of cuts the tension, but also is saying this person is saying this thing, or this is this, or whatever. There's something that's like, I mean, I think that feels, to me at least, more in the present, that feels a little bit more curious, exciting, things could go either way kind of thing. That I don't know, is like, yeah, I'm maybe I am looking forward to Gemini energy. I've turned a corner as we get to the end.
It'll be great.
Hell
I'm
yeah.
down. Cool.
Well,
enjoy
Gemini season. Let's go.
And if anyone's being dumb, it's just Gemini season. It's all good. Be dumb too.
Yeah. We love you. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.